For some analysis, let's turn to Aurel Braun. He's a professor of international relations and political science at the University of Toronto. Professor, by all accounts, how did day one of these discussions go, in your opinion?
So far, there are encouraging sounds, but we don't have any definite agreement on the table. So there'll be another day of talks, but I think the atmospherics have changed. There has been a conversation between President Trump and President Xi Jinping, and I think that has been helpful. But there are so many points of contention, and at the same time, we see a very high level of interdependence between these two superpowers. And I think each one has strengths that are important, and each one has very significant vulnerabilities. So the question is, can they play to their strength? Can they compensate for vulnerabilities?
What are some of those vulnerabilities?
Let's start with United States, and the American economy under Donald Trump is supposed to be strong, and Mr. Trump has said that trade wars are so easy to win. Well, it turns out they're not that easy to win, and there are elements of dependence that are absolutely crucial. Rare earths, for example, we don't really talk much about it, but when you look at the fact that the United States is trying to increase its military potential and that of its allies because they are concerned about what Russia is doing in Ukraine and in Europe, they really need crucial rare earth minerals, magnets, for example. So there's one in particular, samarium, and it is something that goes into the very powerful magnets that are at the tip of missiles and in the F-35 fighters. That is a crucial element, and the United States has not been able to produce an alternative. They are dependent on China.
Well, you bring up a good point. With much of the focus on these rare earth minerals, and clearly China is dominant in this field, does that give Beijing, Professor, perhaps leverage or the upper hand in these negotiations?
It certainly gives China leverage because despite all the talk of manufacturing everything at home and so on, it is very difficult to process some of these rare earths because they are very dangerous. They pollute a great deal, and often they're not very profitable, especially in a high-wage area. Now, having said that, and how important this is to the American military and to the strategic balance, one should also recognize that, in fact, China is dependent as well on the American market, that China is an exporter, the premier, the largest exporter in the world, that its economy has a significant degree of dependence on exports, perhaps more than that of the United States. So, yes, China can use this leverage, but at the same time, it also needs to import certain key things, chips, microchips from the United States, but it needs the market in general. It needs the market for all sorts of products. And therefore, high tariffs hurts the economy of each of these countries. And this is why I think they've come to the conclusion that rather than to keep these kind of confrontational approaches, that they might be better off if they can find some kind of cooperative means of helping both of their economies while satisfying the strategic military needs.
Yeah, and you talk about cooperative needs, or finding a way to move forward. Would that involve also concessions, Professor, from each side?
Obviously, each side would need to make concessions, and this is why it's premature to talk about success. The Trump administration will always say that talks are going well, but then at the end of the day, sometimes there are significant disappointments. And so without concessions on both parts, it's not likely to work because there are some very powerful interests, whether these are military strategic interests, whether they're economic interests. And so these are two superpowers. These are the two largest economies in the world. And consequently, not only what they do impact each one of those economies, but it impacts tremendously the rest of the international system.
All right, we'll leave it there. Professor Aurel Braun, thank you very much.
Thank you.